Join the Wide Whale team May 29th at 3 p.m. Eastern for part 2 of our 3-part virtual event series, Voice of the Resident. For part 2, we will look specifically at residency. Using AI topic analysis, we've analyzed the free text of 400,000 Google reviews from residents of hundreds of top multifamily groups, including the NMHC Top 50, to identify how often 50 key topics are mentioned by residents. By filtering for and analyzing the topics by life cycle stage, we can isolate which topics are more influential during residency, versus tour, or renewal. Go to widewhale.com/data to sign up or find it in the revised community. That's widewhale.com/data.
Hello, welcome to the Rooms with Ronald podcast, brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington. In 2023, I set an intention to shop 100 apartment communities to see how leasing was evolving around the country. Rooms with Ronald was born out of that experience. In this series, I share my experiences and engage in meaningful conversations with other professionals in the industry as we discuss all things related to leasing and marketing. Join in as we expand the Rooms with Ronald experiment. Hello, and welcome to another amazing episode of Rooms with Ronald. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington, and today we have an exciting episode with you. I am joined by my good friends, industry speaker Stephanie Anderson, who is the Senior Director of Communications and Social Media at Grace Hill, and Christy Ficker, who is the VP of Enterprise Growth at RealLink. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys.
Thank you
This
for
is
having
fun. Yeah.
I thought it would be fun to kind of give the listeners a little tease of our Apartmentalize session, Leasing Across America, Impacts and Insights from 100 Shops. What do you guys think?
Love it.
Well, first of all, thank you for doing all of the heavy lifting for this last year with 100 shops that you completed on your own time. That's amazing.
I thought it was super important to know like what's going on in the leasing realm. Like I like to think of myself as a leasing guru, and I think you can only be a guru if you're in the thick of it with people and really understand what they're going through and what the experience is across the whole nation.
Agreed.
So, Stephanie, I'm going to start with you because you have all these numbers. You're all over the place. You know, Graceville has great data and everything. What are we seeing in terms of leasing across America, and why is our session that we're presenting so important in today's age?
Okay, that is a big question, Ronald. No pressure here. With so many changes in the multifamily industry, that just the past couple of years alone, a lot of discussion has been around staff turnover, how to centralize operations, and really how to grow revenue with lower cost and potentially fewer people or specialized roles. So amenities and technology, of course, are part of that conversation too. I don't even think I need to mention the AI buzzword. But while those topics tend to dominate the headlines and boardroom conversations, it's truly important to remember that the resident experience is still a very people-centered experience. Most residents interact with the on-site staff in a variety of ways, and those interactions are often more important to their experience than any physical amenity or latest technology. In fact, one of our recent surveys through Grace Hill has shown that about a third cite that the staff is their number one reason for deciding to lease. So during the leasing process, the people and the team that work there on site is really a big part of their decision-making process. So that just implies those interactions that residents and potential residents are having during that prospect phase of their life cycle are truly critical to their decision to lease.
I am so glad you proved that out. So we did a webinar on this a few months ago, Steph, and I wanted to prove that out too, because I knew when I was physically in a leasing role years ago, I knew that my personality and how I treated prospects is truly what helped me get more rentals. That's what helped me elevate my career. And I knew that that was a tool that I could pull a lever on in when I was in that kind of a role, but there's very little data behind it. So I'm super excited to hear more about this in our session at Apartmentalize because we are starting to put numbers to that and show how much the people do matter and that people actually they're buying into your leasing team before they ever truly rent the apartment.
I think
Absolutely.
it's so funny. Like, I hear all the time, like AI is coming for my job, right? It's going to replace this
Yeah.
leasing. You have centralization, you have specialization, whatever we're going to call it. And I'm like, the human touch is always going to have to be there. And I always like to tell my leasing staff, like, people buy from people they like and that they
Mhm.
trust. And the point of case, when I started in this industry 10 years ago, I know you two were just babies then. But when I started in the industry, the very first thing, like in Sacramento, I showed up to the property and I remember I was in a full suit because I worked in hotels and that's just what we did 10 years ago, right? And the manager and the leasing manager said to me, okay, we're going to take you on a mock tour and you have to sell us the apartment. We'll guide you to where the model is because we don't expect you to know that part. But what we're looking for is this personality because the manager said to me, I can teach you this unit has this many square footage and we sit on this many, but what I can't teach you is personality. And I was like, oh, okay. So I had to get real quirky real quick because we're going on and they're like they had a whole backstory. Like, we're two sisters, we're moving into a two-bedroom, we want it for $500, XYZ. And I was just like, okay, well, I want an apartment for $500 too. So but how do you overcome that? And I use that like personality. And that's why I think for me, I joke on the tour, right? When the first thing you come in and I ask for your ID, I say, just in case you want to kidnap me, but I promise in about 2 hours, you're going to be bringing me back because I'm going to be super hungry and I'm going to want my $10 Starbucks order. And the prospect starts to laugh, which now sets the stage for this like, okay, this is going to be a fun tour. It's not going to be stuffy. It's not going to be like any of the other tours that I went on today.
I love
Right.
that. When we were just at the AIM conference recently, we learned just how important humor is in the selling process. It really adds that authentic value, and people can bond during that time. Appropriate humor, of course, but I love that people are taking a little bit more risk and really becoming more people centered than ever with building those relationships.
Agreed.
Christy, I know you like to use humor and like you said, you talked about your personal. So like I just shared like my like ID. Did you have like a go-to that you kind of used the humor to like break the ice with prospects?
I don't know if it's so much humor. I don't think I'm very naturally funny. I think just funny things happen to me. Like this is why I should have a reality show. And so what I think for me it's more vulnerability and approachability and just being that real authentic version of myself. And you guys probably see this even in real life when you're with me is I don't pretend to have my whole life put together. I don't pretend like things aren't falling apart behind the scenes sometimes. I mean, if you could have seen Steph and I before we presented our session at AIM, like we're sweating bullets and that people think we look so put together sometimes when we're out there. So for me, it's probably a little bit less about humor and just being my real authentic self and trying to find a way to connect with that other human. That is something that I think you're born with it, but I also think that you can hone it over time. And I certainly have been able to do that. I've learned how to better read people or, because sometimes you get the tour and I'm a super loud, outgoing people kind of person, but not everybody is that way. And so my personality can be a little overwhelming to people if they are more reserved, quiet, or you get that analytical prospect that they're all about the numbers and they just want the answers and they don't want any of the fluff. So I just got good over the years at learning what I can dial up or when I need to dial it down a little bit and just find a way to connect with those individual people.
Well, you weren't voted most likely to make the most friends.
That's right. I forgot about that. I know, but not everybody wants to be your friend sometimes. There's a difference between like being friendly and being a really good friend. And some people you just have to know if they want to be left alone or they want to sit by themselves. They're trying to have a minute to collect their thoughts because conferences are really busy or a prospect just is really private and they don't want to share a million details with you. You have to learn how to make that connection so they feel safe and you can pull that information out of them a little more easily down the road.
Absolutely. Stephanie, did you have like a go-to when you were on site leasing?
My personality was always something that was kind of at the forefront of what I did. I just love people. Even though I am an introverted extrovert,
Oh,
Yeah.
you both are, aren't you?
yeah, so it takes a lot of energy. It's almost like a show for me, like, okay, it's go time, like get yourself together. And for me, it really is creating those genuine connections. I will say, I worked at a community that was really, really hard, top of the market to lease. And it was a 22-year-old community, but the pricing was actually more expensive than any of the triple A class luxury properties that were coming in the area. And it was for a boutique style management company. So we're talking, very elite, very classy, all of the things. But when I tell you those appliances were the original, they were 22 years old. So how do you sell this? And, it was difficult, but I just remember always showing my personality. And during the time that I was there, I was pregnant with my daughter, my second baby. So we would always relate on, oh my gosh, what if your water breaks? And I'm like, well, then I hope you lease the apartment. You have to sign today because I don't know if I'm going to be here tomorrow. I have to push that belly out a little bit. And so I had to look 9 months pregnant for the entire 9 months. You know what I mean? Like to keep that
I
going.
love this.
But the idea was that they saw a piece of me, and we connected, and they wanted to do business with me. And that always stuck with me, that every apartment has four walls, but they don't have me, and they
Yes.
don't have you, and they don't have you. And when you have that mentality set, it really does set the stage for success.
Yeah, I love that. Like, way to use, your condition to get the lease. So,
Yeah.
Christy, we kind of talked about what we saw like across it, but I like to think of you as the queen of the video, the virtual tour, per se. Everyone knows you for that. So what are we seeing in terms of virtual leasing right now?
So I'm really excited because the industry is finally starting to catch up with what I was trying to do like 8 or 9 years ago. I mean, I was using video way pre-pandemic, right? Before it ever forced us to start using video. And I saw it was the same thing as, what Steph is saying, like showing off your personality. But I realized, so as soon as smartphones came out and you could really record video on a phone, I was like, I have to figure out a way to use this because it's going to help me take my personality to a prospect sooner in the process. Like now I don't have to physically wait for them to come in the door, but I can show myself and my team off a little sooner. So I've been doing this for a long time, but the data from just this past year, so it came out the end of last year. So this is what we're presenting as part of this session at Apartmentalize. And so this was NMHC and Grace Hill's annual renter survey. 1/3 of apartment renters last year moved into their apartment without ever touring it in person. 1/3. I just want that to sink in for a minute because that's a really large portion of our renter base. And yet we have a lot of people who still aren't embracing video, or they say, what I hear most often is our office is open, people want to come for in-person tours. Well, yes, some of them do want to come for in-person tours. But I can tell you right now, I'm not the girl who's to the grocery and walking up and down the aisles every week. I'm doing an online order and I'm having it delivered because I'm literally never around. I'm never home, right? I'm always on the road. Now, my grandma, she loves to go every week and she walks up and down the aisles and she's there for like 2 hours because she has nothing else to do. She truly enjoys it. For me, that's a pain point. So they're giving me an option to shop the way that works best for me and my schedule. And sometimes I will go in person. If I really just don't want to place an order, I'm not sure what I want, I'll go and browse around. But with 1/3 of those renters renting without visiting in person last year, that number is up from the year prior, and I anticipate it's going to keep inching further and further to, I think we're going to get to a point where we really are going to have probably about 50% of our renter base who's going to prefer to shop in that way.
Yeah, I, totally agree with that because 8 or 9 years ago, it was very uncommon for people to move across the country, right? Once you were like kind of in your city, you were just kind of there. But now, with remote work on the rise, with all of those things, I could live anywhere. And
Right.
I don't have to be stuck into a 30-year mortgage and do all this. So like you have to be able to meet the renter where they're at. And the companies that aren't doing that yet, are potentially losing out, like you said, a third. And just to put that into perspective for people listening, that would be like if the three of us were going to look for an apartment, one of us are going to be that one person who is not going in person. It's
Yeah,
probably
you're
not
just
going to be me.
automatically eliminating
Probably
a
Chrissy.
third of your prospect base, or you're either eliminating one third of your current prospect base if you're not willing to do business the way that they want to do it, or you're creating friction for them that's making it more painful for them to rent to choose you or to rent with you. And I think that's really important. And I get it, a few years ago when the technology wasn't necessarily there, but now there's a lot of different technology that makes it easy to do this. It's not hard for an on-site team and it's not hard for the renter. And it's integrated with a lot of our platforms and systems. So it's more connected. Like back when I was trying to do it, I literally was just piecemealing it together, right? With what technology was at that point in time. The industry was nowhere close to where we are now. So it's a lot easier to do that now. But I also think something that we haven't kept up with, and we'll talk about this in our session, is are we training our people? Because touring live on a video feed is a little bit different than how you tour in person. And sometimes you don't have as much time to have all of that banter back and forth. It's really more of a like, let's get to the chase. Let's tour this unit. Do you like it? Do you not? What are the next steps kind of thing when you're on video? So I don't know if we are necessarily, if our training has even caught up yet. And Ronald, you could probably speak to this because this is your role and we'll talk about it more in June. But I think that's a really important element of any technology that we have these days. It's not just video, it's chat tools, it's the AI, lots of AI things are coming out. Are we training our people how to sell with that technology and not just using the traditional methods?
Absolutely. And the other thing too, that we're going to talk about in our session, I think is tech hurting us or helping us?
Right.
And that could be a whole long debate that we don't have time for today. So you're just gonna have to come to the session.
Yes, I love that teaser.
Now, Stephanie, I have another loaded question for you. I like to give you the loaded questions, but
I
this
don't
is
know why you do this to me.
a very important question
Okay,
that has been weighing on my mind recently. Are you ready for this?
possibly.
Join the Wide Whale team May 29th at 3 p.m. Eastern for part 2 of our 3-part virtual event series, Voice of the Resident. For part 2, we will look specifically at residency. Using AI topic analysis, we've analyzed the free text of 400,000 Google reviews from residents of hundreds of top multifamily groups, including the NMHC Top 50, to identify how often 50 key topics are mentioned by residents. By filtering for and analyzing the topics by life cycle stage, we can isolate which topics are more influential during residency, versus tour, or renewal. Go to widewhale.com/data to sign up or find it in the revised community. That's widewhale.com/data.
Is mystery shopping dead?
Short answer, no. Let's expand on it though. So, in order to know what's happening, you have to have eyes and ears on what's going on. And it should be non-subjective. So obviously there could be questionable times with a shopper and inaccuracies because we're human and that's the human element of doing things. But ultimately, it has to be about consistency. You have to know that your team members are taking the skills that you have helped them develop and continue to develop and actually apply them to what they're doing. And in order to do that, you have to be able to challenge what they're doing, see what they're doing, how you can improve, because then that's how you build their training. But you also have to set a culture in your organization that makes it clear that, oh, if you get a bad shop, you're getting fired. Or, oh, if you get a perfect 100, then you get a bonus. The problem I have with that is I could be a robot, literally ask all the right questions but have no personality behind it. But because I nailed every single question, I get the 100% and I get the bonus. But you have somebody else over here who might be missing little pieces there, but they could still close the sale, still build rapport and make that amazing experience for the customer. When we were at AIM, one of the things that stood out to me was when we heard from the Ritz-Carlton and the gentleman, John, said, every customer, every time, always. And that really rings true in terms of our process. But how do you know that there's that consistency there? You have to have shops so that you know what's happening. And the shops need to be a combination of video shops, phone shops, email shops. I recently saw an article that I sent to both of you. And if you read it, it talked about like the 4 things that this person was not seeing when she shopped some communities, what was happening. And she's like, no one is using text.
Yep.
Do we need a tech shop? I don't know. But the question remains of, we have to have these questions in place so that we can better define that renter experience through the journey. And the only way you're going to know what works, because it's not a one size fits all. The 3 of us could come up, obviously with this impeccable design, but it's not going to matter if it doesn't match your audience, it doesn't match your region, your company culture, all of those things. So it's alive and well, Ronald.
When you talked about like text messaging, like it made me think, like, right, I always read my text messages, and actually a statistic says 99% of text messages are read and 95% of those are read within the first 3 minutes. A lot of times though, when you sent that article to me, the first thing I went to is like, I wonder what PMS software that they're using, because different ones have different rules, right? Some you have to create a resident portal and go in and opt in for the text messages before the site can even have the button to send you the text messages. Other ones, you can send the text message, you get the text message and it says, do you want to opt in? So that was like where my mind first went on that. The second thing, like when I read the article, I was like, that's a small sample size of what they're going through, but it all rang true to me. Like, it's all things that I saw on that end. Christy, what about mystery shops in the virtual realm? I don't know that a lot of companies are out there doing that yet.
Yes, they're not, but there are some really cool things coming. And I think that what you have the opportunity to do, so if you are an organization and you are using video currently and your team is taking virtual tours, well, guess what? Those are always recorded. So now you have this additional layer of a training tool, to Steph's point. Like, you don't want to use it as a disciplinary tool. You don't want to definitely reward for it and give extra bonuses if they just check all of the boxes. But with those, what I call traditional shopping reports, sometimes they become a he said, she said, right? Where like the shopper just sounds completely atrocious and like they didn't remember anything about the property, but then the leasing agent swears that they answered all the questions correctly. And you have this he said, she said. And so back in the day, even some of the shopper stuff, I don't know if you guys do this, but the shoppers would try to wear like body cameras, and we were trying to figure that out. So it wasn't so much of this he said, she said, that goes back and forth sometimes. But on video, I think the really neat thing that you have is you can watch that back. So one, as you're not waiting for that physical shopper to come in, if you're the leasing agent and you just took this virtual tour, you can go back and watch that. Just like we used to listen to phone calls back in the day, I listened to every one of my leasing phone calls, and the team used to tease me about it, but it's because I didn't realize things that I was saying or doing, or filler words that I would use, or maybe I was sounding like a robot because I wanted to ask all of the questions I was supposed to ask the prospect, but I wasn't doing it in this conversational way. So I would listen to all of my phone calls. But now if you're a leasing agent, you can just go back and watch that video tour, and you yourself, without waiting for a shopper or even waiting for your trainer or your training department, you can self-evaluate. And I think that's such a cool thing to have. And I think that, speaking about, 100 shops and how leasing teams did out in the field, this is a gap that we have that this could really fill that.
Yeah. I know for me, like when I am creating a shop program, like, and I'm reviewing it, I tend to try to take away a lot of the subjective questions, but I always make sure the question in there, the only subjective question that tries to remain in there, is based off of the leasing professional's presentation. Were you either A, if it's a phone shop, motivated to go visit the community, or if it's an in-person shop, were you motivated to lease the apartment, right? Because everything else, I can, as Stephanie says, a robot can do. They can go through and they can check it off. But if that shopper was not motivated to do that, to come to the appointment, that means that they made the appointment, they had no intentions of showing up, right? And people do that all the time. Or you did not connect with them. So to me, I always tell my teams, like, this is the most important question on the whole shop.
Yes.
Right.
And I don't think shopping
matters. If you couldn't close the sale and overcome those objectives, then you just wasted your time on that entire tour.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the other thing too with video that you can do is one, you also get a copy of that you can then share with the prospect. So think about when you take an in-person tour, that's just a one-time deal, right? And if they had roommates, significant others, they have to come in and retour. Whereas if you did a virtual tour, you have a copy of that, and now that person can share that with roommates, spouses, whoever. But then that also gets shared with your training team, with your regional manager. And I also love the idea of, excuse me, sharing these with your like development team. So if you have a development arm of your company or you're doing lease ups and planning some of these, not just to see how did this leasing agent do, but what are the renters saying? What is the feedback that renters are giving us about this product? And should we change something on the next product that we're about to develop? Or when you go into budget season, is there something we need to address with that? Like something that we need to fix on the property?
So, as we wrap up here, as a little teaser, Stephanie, what are one or two things that people can expect to take away at our session in your eyes?
Okay, so first and foremost is having fun. I think that to be able to go to NAA is an experience in and of itself, but to come to our session, we're going to have fun and we're going to look really good doing it. But you're also going to take away a lot of key items that you can, it's going to be more thought provoking and then actionable takeaways that you can apply within your organization. You know, I think that we're going to challenge assumptions because we all have assumptions, and we have assumptions as it pertains to things like mystery shopping and how that fits into our company. We also know that there is the whole back to basics idea, which I won't really open up that can of worms with Christy, but the idea there that we need to be going back to that in whatever capacity that looks like. And I think that we're going to also consider that people are cutting things out like shopping because they have to cut back on expenses. And marketing and training expenses usually are the first to go with the company. So I think we're going to have to think about those things, and we're going to give you valuable information that you want to go back and really be more analytical with what you're doing. I think that there's going to be some surprises, but I also think there's a lot of consistency because not only did you shop 100 shops, but there were over 80 different management companies. So no one's going to be able to say, oh, Ronald, you chose 5 different management companies and they all had extremely high budgets or low budgets or vice versa. Instead, it's across the board. We're seeing these trends. And then I think you're going to be able to look at the strategies that we're offering and take that back to your company. So it's going to be fun and engaging, and you're going to learn a lot.
I was very thoughtful about how that looked, right? Because I knew what the end goal was. And I didn't want anyone to say that. And so not only was it over 80, it was in 28 different cities and 13 states. So it's a wide
product too.
Different product type, garden, high rise. So you can't leave this session being like, oh, my property isn't going to pertain to this because
it's not skewed data. No.
Yeah. And
it's in line with what we're seeing on a national level, and we'll be able to talk about that too. So what we're seeing at Grace Hill on a national level is consistent with what you're showing. So there's definitely problems, but they're fixable problems, and we're going to help allude to those during the session.
Love it. And Christy, what about you? What can we take away? I wanted to make sure we had virtual leasing had a seat at the table in this session because I think it's super important. So what do people are going to walk away from our session from the virtual leasing side?
Well, I think you're going to learn where the holes and the gaps are with that and what you might not be thinking of if you're using just some status quo tools. What problems does that then give your team and the prospect? Does that create more friction, or is there a way that you can use that and still make the process good? I also think that, okay, guys, this is not going to be a boring panel. This is not when we are sitting up there interviewing each other on stage. Can we just be clear about that? To Steph's point, you're going to have fun. It's going to be super engaging, but you're also going to get a lot of data because I think a lot of times the people who are in these sessions, they know they need to make a change, but they struggle to get the yeses from the higher ups in the organization. So we're going to have a lot of data that's going to show them that they're not alone. They're not the only ones that maybe are feeling the pain of this or know that they have an issue that they need to correct. But we're also going to give the data that they can take then to the C-suite or whomever, owners, investors, to get them the tools and strategies that they need to fix this problem and make it better, to give a better experience to the renter, because that's ultimately what we're all trying to do, is give them a better experience when they're renting.
I love that. I think for me, like the two things like I'm excited for people to take away is to like finally be able to share all this data because you both have seen it. Some of it's very eye-opening. Like you're like, oh, I did not expect it to go that way or this way. So I think they're gonna be able to say, like, okay, maybe I know this about my community, right? But I'm not going to say anything because what if I'm out here in the field by myself? So now you have the data that's going to be like, okay, we need some work. So there's that. But I'm excited to say, this is what you're seeing. Here's how virtual leasing can help you. Here's how the shop program can help you and how we can make this better because guess what? There's enough prospects in this world to go around to every apartment community and fill all of our buildings, right? Like this whole mentality of like, I don't want to tell anyone my secret sauce.
Well,
Like, has
let's
to
face it.
go.
I mean, most of us are already getting enough traffic. We
Yeah.
just aren't closing on it. We're not converting it.
And I think people are going to be really shocked when they kind of see those statistics during our session.
Agreed.
Agree.
Any final words from you two before we wrap up?
I am most excited about Philly to have some authentic food there. I've never been to Philly before, and I'm excited about the session. So there you have it.
Yeah, same. Y'all know I just like to see everyone and catch up. But Ronald, thank you for doing all of these shops and putting this together so that we have an opportunity to present this to the industry. I think it is different than anything that's been presented before. It's really cool to be a part of that. So thank you.
Absolutely.
I thank you both for agreeing to be on the stage with me. This is like my chance, my dreams come true. A lot of people know like I've been following you guys for a long time and I've always like I want to present with these people just because of the energy that you guys bring. So thank you for joining me on this. And if you're coming to Apartmentalize in Philadelphia, you can catch Leasing Across America, Impacts and Insights from 100 shops on June 20th at 3:30 p.m. Thank you so much for joining in this episode of Rooms with Ronald. We had Stephanie Anderson, who is the Senior Director of Communications and Social Media at Grace Hill, and Christy Ficker, who is the VP of Enterprise Growth at RealLink. Until next time, guys, happy leasing. You had to hit stop, Steph.
Thank you for tuning in today. I hope I left you with some fresh ideas or a new perspective. Leasing and marketing are evolving rapidly, and Rooms with Ronald is committed to offering a place to hear about those changes. We also celebrate and acknowledge the fundamentals of exceptional service that will never go out of style. So, if you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, or subscribe. Visit multifamilymedianetwork.com to learn more about our other exceptional industry podcasts, call pieces, and sponsorship opportunities.